remember to buy a copy of your favorite books from the Cheeky merchants. If we don't have it, we'll source it for you, but we'll definitely find the book for you. Good evening, Cheeky Natives. Welcome to another episode of the Cheeky Natives. I feel like this year is the year that we make all of our literary dreams come true. We've had so many of our faves on the Cheeky Natives, and in the spirit of that engagement, I'm really excited to welcome today's guest. But before I do that, I need to just check how my fave is doing. The Tlokonolo Boo, how you doing?
Listen, first of all, our podcast turned 7 this year, and 7 is like the number of perfection. And I think this year we're really coming for it. Like, we are coming for it all. We are perfecting everything. So I'm good, and I'm really excited about today. But I'll let you have the honors so we can get right into it.
Perfect. Thanks, friend. And I'm really excited to introduce today's. So I'm excited to introduce today's guest, who is Bolu Babalola, who is a British Nigerian woman with a Miss Lee bachelor's degree in law and a master's degree in American politics. And she feels it is important to state that her thesis was on Beyonce's Lemonade, and she was awarded a distinction for it. So essentially, she has a master's degree in Beyonce. When will your faves? A writer of books, scripts, culture pieces, and retorts, a lover of love and self-coined rom connoisseur. Bolu Babalola writes the stories of dynamic women with distinct voices who love and are loved audaciously. She's a big believer in women being both beauty and the beast, and she is not a fan of writing her own bios. Join the club. Her short story collection, Love in Color, was published in 2020, became a Times bestseller, and was shortlisted for Waterstone's Book of the Year. Her debut novel, Honey and Spice, was published in July 2022, was a Reese Witherspoon book club pick, and won the inaugural TikTok award for Book of the Year. And she is today's guest. Welcome.
Hello. Oh my God, I'm so excited to be here with you guys.
Whoa. So for me, I think the first question is obviously, I loved Love in Color.
Thank you.
I kind of loved the story about like awkward first dates, because I was like, yeah, I like to just have an awkward first date, then meet someone and that's like your real date.
Yeah.
And I feel like in Love in Color and in Honey and Spice, there's this exploration of love. And I wanted to know, why was this your topic of choice? You know, why have you coined yourself as the rom connoisseur?
It's so funny because I don't ever remember actively choosing the subject. I've just genuinely loved it since I was very young. I feel like obviously it's an offshoot of you read the fairy tales when you're younger. But then as I developed my own taste, and my mum had this big bookshelf. I read really widely. I was a nerd. But my mum had a big bookshelf shelf of romances and women's fiction and general fiction for women, which tends to have a lot of romance in it. And I just gobbled them up. And there was something about how they made me feel. Like, I don't know what it is, but writing about love and reading about love, it makes just release a sense of hope and joy. It makes you feel lighter and the world feel brighter. And naturally, when I started writing, I was very young, like literally I was like 12. Those are the kind of things I wrote. Obviously, when I was 12 years old, it was the most basic, based on like, I don't know, Sabrina the Teenage Witch kind of high school romance. But as I got older, I got really like psychologically and like anthropologically fascinated by how love reveals so much of us as humans, vulnerabilities, bravery, insecurities, what we like about ourselves. It challenges us. I just fell more in love with the subject as I got older, and I'm here. And what I love about it is like it's a very malleable subject. So I can jump from thriller to history and all of this stuff, drama, through the prism of love.
Love that this book feels like an anthropological study, right? Interesting. And the Tlokonolo and I, part of the reason why we began the Cheeky Natives was because we felt that people didn't treat Black literature with the respect that it deserved, right? So people didn't believe that it was serious writing. People didn't believe that it could be anything other than writing for a particular gaze or for the enjoyment of certain people. And this book is interesting because in many ways it also feels like it could be an anthropological study, right? Like you could go to a sociology class, an anthropological class, and actually have a discussion of this book. And I think it's interesting that a romance book does that, right? So I think of White Wall College, in terms of the location and what these students have to go through, right? Who are the characters in the book? So I think about the code switching that these students have to do. So even the existence of Blackwell, right? What it
Mhm.
means to be a black person in a very wide space that also doesn't make space for who you are, that doesn't make space for all of the multiple identities that you have to inhabit as a black person, right? You are a black student at one of the most prestigious universities in the country, and you're still experiencing police violence, right? You're still treated in very particular ways. And I actually am really curious about why you chose this location, but also why you chose to have the contrast between Whitewell and Blackwell, right? In a romance novel, because your characters just be going through it outside of love, outside of all the cute butterflies and all that they experience. There's a really particular way in which you explore the lives of young Black students in problematic spaces.
There's two things about that. I feel like that is life. Life, like love and romance, happens alongside real life and real crap happening. And what I didn't want this to be was like this kind of fairy tale land where everything is perfect. I wanted love to, and the joy as well, to work through the kind of thorny bits of life. And I just feel like that is like when I even look at my favorite romances, going back to, I don't know, Jane Austen, they were all reflections on society, of social interactions, of back then it was class, you know, discrimination, prejudices, well, literally Pride and Prejudice. So I feel like the best romances aren't just about the couple. It's how the couple interacts with the world around them. And the reason I wanted it to be university is first, I feel like I've always wanted my first novel to be the thing that I wanted to read when I was like 15, 16, 17. And I started writing it when I was like 23, 24. And I was like, oh, I can't really write about I don't really feel I could, but I don't really feel like writing about high school. But I want something that feels quite young. So I was like, okay, well, how come there's not a lot of collegiate romances? Why don't we have that? And so I wanted to explore the heightened emotions of like first love in a more adult setting than high school. But also, I feel like that time in like college, university is such a transitional time as a young adult. You are trying to find your tribe, you're trying to find yourself, you're trying to find your community. And then you're falling in love and experiencing all these emotions at the same time. It's messy. And I thought it was such a nice crucible to explore dynamics and interrelational dynamics in. And the reason I wanted it to be in an ACS is because like when I went to university similar to Whitewell, and the ACS was so much fun. Like it was where I really found my people, but also the drama, the corruption of the politics. Like it was, oh my goodness, it was messy, you guys. And I felt like I didn't really see that in the media that I was like consuming. So I wanted to reflect that a little bit as well, and reflect some of our experiences. And also, I feel like with Blackwell, it gave me a chance to really explore what it is to be Black Brit in a very contained manner. I feel like if it was in the outside world, I feel like it would just be a little bit more, I don't know, it wouldn't be as concentrated. And I really wanted to explore what it is to be in this like black to black space within and hone in on that, if that makes sense.
I think that Honey and Spice, while people want to dub it as a kind of romance novel, is not only a romance novel. I think that you ask of the reader to ask really difficult questions of themselves, and also you ask the characters to ask difficult questions about themselves. One of the things that I think you touch on in the book is about women and casual relationships, right? You think about Kiki, for instance, and how Kiki, as we meet her, she's just like, you know what, I ain't got no time for this. Right? But I think you do a really interesting commentary about if we were to take any of the male characters in the book and put them on casual relationships, that would be fine. But it's frowned for women to be able to engage in casual relationships because women are supposed to aspire to this thing of marriage, right? So I found it really fascinating. Also thinking of Kiki's kind of background, right? Like an Syrian girl, right? Where we believe a lot of these things are about you have to, as a proper Nigerian woman, you have to be married. So I wanted to speak a little bit about that, right? About your commentary around women and having casual relationships. particularly pivotal transition.
Yeah, I just felt, again, I just wanted to write real life, and I found often that there weren't really complex, or let me not say there weren't, but there weren't a lot of complex explorations of young Black female sexuality, in a sense that the woman was either like, she was either hypersexualized for no reason, it was very 2D, or she was like desexualized, and I just wanted it to be like a complex thing where with Kiki, her relationship with sex is so interesting, because I think it is anyway. And even like writing that, I had to I really worked hard and went over, because it's very thorny. It's because like she was, in one sense, she is very empowered and she wants to enjoy herself. In another sense, she has like a little bit of trauma around physicality and sexuality. And sometimes that it bees like that. You know? It was about balancing that, and also her like wanting to have sex, and then almost reconvening and checking in on herself emotionally. Am I ready? Yes, I want to, but am I ready? And I wanted that to be like a battle, like a little bit of a conflict within her, because when I was at university, I feel like I knew a lot of women who weren't having sex, and they felt so self-conscious about it. And first of all, it wasn't that they were like necessarily like super religious. It was like they just didn't have the opportunity to have sex, and also like just racial dynamics. Just dating as a Black woman in the UK. And I really wanted to explore that kind of thing. Like a woman can be really sexy and sexual and have a sexual appetite, and also just like not have had sex. And I didn't want it to be like necessarily like a big deal. I wanted it to be discussed, but not like a huge deal or a defining character trait. So it was something that I was conscious about, but also I just really wanted to write like a real girl. And I feel like a lot of that is messy. Real like womanhood and like personhood is just messy. So I just wanted to explore that.
We're taking a short break. We're taking a short break. I love that, because actually one of our questions was around Kiki's first orgasm, and it stands out particularly in the book because there's a navigation that Kiki has to do with herself around her ideas of reciprocity, around her ideas of pleasure. So Kiki almost seems to feel like, and not of her own doing, I think that being a young woman in a society where Kiki's also the oldest African daughter, there's many things, right? There's many things about service and servitude and reciprocity that Kiki hasn't quite had a grip on, just because of who she is and her position in the world. But that scene felt particularly liberating, right? And I think in a way it also painted Malakai as a different person, because I think Malakai is everybody's favorite problematic person in this book, right? Malakai is a problematic fave. Little Konola, I know Malakai is your dream bae, but Malakai is a problematic fave.
He is.
Malakai is, guys. This is the hill I'm willing to die on. But in that particular moment, two things are revealed about, or things are revealed about either one of them. So we realize that Kiki's not as self-assured and as confident and as strong as we think. That in many ways, some of that is also a veneer, some of that is also a shield that she's had to put up. But Malakai is also is revealed to actually just be different, right? This is a man who's actually focused on women's pleasure. We shouldn't be shocked by this, but because we know how cis-het men move as it relates to sex, and women were shocked, were taken away, were blown away. And I wanted to talk about that particular moment as a revelatory moment for both of these characters, right? And not just because of the sex, but because of the social dynamics, but also particularly for Malakai, what's revealed about Malakai in that scene. Because I feel like it changes completely how you think of Malakai. Because I'd been on the fence a little bit about him until that moment. I was like, okay, maybe you're not the waste man of Blackwell after all.
That's hilarious. I think I really wanted, it was a scene that I really worked hard on. I really wanted to make sure it reflected their dynamics and also revealed something about their dynamic and who they really were and what they were hiding and their vulnerabilities. And with Malakai, it's so interesting about that scene because, yes, he was very tender and thought about her and stuff like that. He is like a kind, fundamentally, I think he's a kind person, despite all of the layers of masculinity, blah, blah, blah. But what's so interesting about that scene is that whenever I did like little book club talk, they were like, oh, which man ever does that? Da, 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 da. And there was two things that struck me. First of all, was like, it made me very sad. I've definitely met men who are like that. But also I wanted to make sure that especially young women read that and knew that they can say no, and what they can like expect from men, and they shouldn't expect men to necessarily just be like, I want to have sex and then you should have to reciprocate, da, 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 da. And I really it was important for me to write a dynamic where the man was patient and tender, but he didn't make it a thing. He was like, yeah, cool, like I'll wait, like it's fine, I want you to be comfortable, because he liked her. And that was really, really important to me. And I like that you mentioned that he was like, oh, do I need to like reciprocate? Because again, like she is a confident person, but I also wanted to show that you can be confident and vulnerable and have like your things as well that you need to work through. She's a feminist. She preaches about all of this stuff, but sometimes we don't listen to our own advice, and we can tell other people what to do, and we don't be doing the same things ourselves. And Kiki is somebody who would tell another woman, no, you don't have to do that. Why would you need to do that? But when she's in a vulnerable situation, she almost falls into that trap because, again, like I said, dynamics, what she's used to, and she's almost like unguarded in that moment. She is unguarded in that moment. And I wanted to show that sometimes we slip up and we have our vulnerabilities, and it's important to have somebody who respects us enough to like listen to what we're really saying and what we really need.
Alma has brought us here, so we now need to go into it.
Of course, because I would bring you to your favorite scenes, right?
It's interesting to think about, right? Like when I read Honey and Spice and I read about Malakai, I was like, shit, hold up, man. Do men like Malakai even exist? And I think the question for me about do men like Malakai even exist is what you were speaking about. Like at its core, outside of the problematicness, Malakai is good, right? Not necessarily nice, but Malakai is kind, right?
Yeah.
And I think for me, when I was saying that do men like Malakai exist, it's about that, right?
Yeah.
Do good people exist, right?
And that's fair.
But I think in truth, in the world, it's like Malakai's doing all these things, cosplaying, holding hands. It's a lot, right? Is the bar really that low?
I know.
Yes.
Oh, friend, I know. Like it is low. Like it's because when I was dating, I was like, I realized like, oh gosh, men aren't fundamentally kind. And I'm like, all the things that I wanted in a partner, I could boil down to, oh, it's kindness. It's consideration. It's like the way my friends treat me. Yeah. And it's hard to find. So I do understand that. And I think it's a fundamental issue in the streets, in the dating world, where it's just the consideration. And people don't also realize, I'm going to go into a rant, people don't also realize that even if you're dating someone casually, you can still treat them with kindness. For some reason, they believe that being casual with someone means that you can just be cavalier and callous with their feelings. And these are human beings. And even if it's casual sex, you're still relating to another human being, and there's still a degree of care that's necessary in that space. Oh, I forgot even what I was saying. I knew I was going to go into a rant.
Listen, first of all, you're preaching, because I think fundamentally that's what I think when I think about Malakai. I think outside of the kind of Malakai at his root was considerate, right?
Yeah.
He may have moments where he wasn't, because, all our faves are problematic. But I think for me, one of the scenes that like, I think about even the fake dating as cosplaying, because these people fundamentally love each other. But I think really for me, the kind of cosplaying, the actual scene of cosplaying was like, damn, like men do this? Like you would like dress up for me? Like you would dress up to make me enjoy something that's really completely nerdy? And for me, that was like, I think Malakai was in it even when they were faking it. Like he was getting to know someone. So there was a lot of vulnerability even in the fakeness that I found really interesting. And so for me, I was like, but do they exist?
I
Right?
know, I know. But they
Yes,
do.
yes,
They
they
do. They do.
do.
They do. They do. And I think that's actually why I write romance. I feel like
Mhm.
it's so hard, it's so easy rather to be cynical in this world, and a few bad dating experiences and you're like, oh my god, there's no hope. And I feel like what I really enjoy about romance, or what I try and imbue and what I like in my favorite romances, is that like they're honing in on something that I feel like you can find in real life, and it reminds us that it should and it does exist and we shouldn't settle for less. And I think that's what I really want to hone in, focus on in my romances. But yeah, it's interesting, the kindness thing, because yeah, it's I think fundamentally I always want to write kind characters, and I feel like that is what a lot of people who have read the book have been like, where do they make these men at?
So I'm curious about the family dynamics in this book, right? Because you see this clash between what it means to have immigrant parents and have their hopes and have their children's realities clash, right? So I think about Malachi and his father, but I also think about what it means for somebody like Kiki to be the firstborn daughter in an African family, and the expectation to, even unspokenly, because yes, that was a difficult situation that Kiki's family found themselves in. But I'm really curious about that, because also that is where we see some of the limitations of the ways in which parents can love their children, right? So people think of this parental love as this boundless, unconditional thing, but there are limitations often in the expression of that love, because you have this clash between what is your hope for your children and the realities of what they want for themselves. And I'm curious about writing those particular relationships, especially Malachi and his
Yeah,
father.
yeah. With I really wanted to focus on Malachi's relationship with his father, because nobody really, especially we don't really see men talking about their daddy issues. Men have they always talking about, oh, girls have daddy issues. Men and their issues with their father, oh my gosh, it says so much about them. And I really wanted to explore Malakai's vulnerability through that prism, and also that this idea of generational patterns. One of my friends said it's not about generational curses, it's about what people have been exposed to in their lives and what they replicate and how they react to what they've been exposed to. And I think with Malakai, it really did affect his relationship, because it was like, man, I don't want to be like my dad. How do I avoid being like my dad? Okay, I'm gonna date casually, so I'm not gonna get involved. But then by doing that, he almost falls into a kind of similar trap, even though he's not a bad guy. And it's complex, and I wanted to explore the gray areas of that. And also, God, like honestly, men's fathers, the piece, the chunk that they have in their hearts, it's big. And I'm writing the sequel to Sun and Honey and Spice now. Actually, Sunbar revising it, and that's one of the things that I'm really honing in on in that. Spoiler alert, but just how it can really affect men. And I really wanted it to also be a way for Kiki to get closer to him and understand him more, because I feel like the F boy trope exists for a reason. But I believe, maybe controversial, there are F boys and there are F boys, right? And I feel like there's men who definitely treat women badly, and then there's men who, yeah, they date casually, they don't do things that are like great, but fundamentally they are not bad people, they're just messy, and I feel like they need to address their emotions first. I feel like almost therapy can fix those ones, and that's what I really wanted to explore, because at the end of the day, we're all humans, we all have our things, and I just wanted to explore that kind of gray area, especially in terms of masculinity.
I love that, right? Because you are right. I was just like, Malachi, if you need some therapy,
You need some therapy.
you're gonna be good. I think one of the things that I really loved about Honey and Spice is that we often speak about love in a romantic sense, but I think what you've done so beautifully is Bell Hooks says that some of the most dearest love that we will have is friendships, right? We're going to find it there. And I think you really do that in Honey and Spice, right? I think about Amina and Kiki's relationship. Yes, they're a little bit messy, but it's life, right? But you do this thing about like the power and the importance of female friendships, and you really make romance even exist in a friendship. And I wanted to speak a little bit about that because I said in my review that I wrote on Instagram, I was like, Bolu must have really great friends because like
I
you don't
do.
find such beautiful scenes about friendships and you don't have good friends, right? But also, I suppose the other element of it is that fauxship, right? Because we know how like Black women are treated a particular way, but I think you start and want to dismantle that trope and be like, ultimately, it's a misunderstanding, and oftentimes it's boys who are within the misunderstanding.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for saying that. I tend not to read reviews because I don't want to get anything into my head, but thank you for saying that. Yeah, first of all, I do have great friends. I'm very fortunate. Like my sister, they're like everything to me. And there was a time in my life where I just was not dating. I was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done. And I used to go on dates with my girls, and it was like the best things. It was like so fun and so joyous, and we'd get each other little gifts, and we treat each other so well. And I really wanted to celebrate that, especially for Kiki, who had trauma with friendships. And I didn't want it to be a thing where like she had trauma with a friendship and then she's like, I'm a guy's girl now. Like I'm done with women. I wanted it to be like she actually has this yearning for friendship. And then she has this beautiful relationship with Amina. And that develops. And again, friendships, they have their ups and downs. It's life, it's normal. We're humans, we make mistakes. But at the end of the day, they have each other's, they got each other. And I really wanted to explore that. And with Chioma and Shanti, I really wanted to flip that trip on the head, love rivals. Because ultimately, I just didn't want these girls to be fighting over a man. Even if the man is Malakai, like he's still a man. And I wanted them to just be like, he's almost inconsequential. Like Kiki doesn't even think about the connection afterwards. These are my girls. And I actually, that's one of my favorite parts of the book, actually, just like that little trio forming, because that's how friendships can form in the most unlikely ways. And I really wanted that kind of romance. For me, there's like three romances in the book. There's of course the Kiki and Malakai is the principal one, but there's also like the friendships, and also like Kiki's relationship with herself. But one of my favorite ones, I have to say, is like the girl gang.
I
So
really love it.
an unconventional member of the girl gang is Simi, right? And I feel like
Mm,
that's a relationship that isn't explored enough because
mm,
her and Simi are diametrically opposed on almost everything that counts. You meet Simi just being unpleasant, doing too much for too little. She doesn't come across as a nice person. And I'm
she's
interested
not.
in women who are not nice. I'm particularly intrigued by women who are not nice. So I think that there's a pressure on women to be nice, but there's a particular kind of pressure on Black women to be nice and to be sweet and to be all of these things, right? As opposed to kindness and being genuine and being
Mm,
authentic. And Simi, in many ways, reveals herself to be almost the hero of a particular situation in Kiki's life because she comes through and in many ways her quick thinking saves the day. I want to talk a little bit about Simi because Simi is actually such a multi-layered character, and I think we're often very quick to paint Black women who we don't like or who do things that we don't necessarily always approve of as being one or being villains, right? But there's a thing that Simi does, and there's an exploration of that character. Simi's relationship with her partner, all of these things reveal so much about her. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why you wrote the Simi Kiki dynamic and how it unfolds in the way that you did.
I wanted to like unpick the mean girl trope. I feel like in a lot of high school, college movies and shows or whatever, there's always like a mean girl. And I just feel like there's a lot more nuance to it. What I like about Simi is that she isn't necessarily nice or sweet, but I think that she's quite principled. I feel like she doesn't really hide or lie. Like she says what she thinks. And I really respect that. And I think Kiki really respects that. So even though she's a little bit like, whew, maybe I wouldn't say intimidated, but she's a bit like, you're a lot. She also really respects her. And I think Simi actually respects Kiki, even though she might not like her all the way or completely agree with her. And I think that's why they can work together almost. I feel like they would actually work very well, being presidents, co-presidents, whatever, or crime bosses. I don't know. I see Simi almost like Nefertiti in Loving Color, like
Yes.
just like a baddie, principled, not cutesy, but gets the job done. But yeah, I just wanted to complicate the idea of the mean girl because I feel like there's so many layers to that. And what makes her mean? And why is she mean? And yes, she's not nice. And yes, she can be like, she has all these thorns, but also she can be like, she can do kind things. She can like, stand up for Kiki. She knows what is wrong. And I also wanted there to be like a queer character. She doesn't feel any shame around that. She is, and it's also very much in line with who she is. She is not someone who apologizes ever, really. And so why would she apologize about her sexuality? Why would she hide her sexuality? She's like, yeah, okay. Even when she comes into the ball with her partner, it's not, oh, I'm coming out. It's like, yeah, I'm here looking a beautiful partner, and that's just it. And I really, that's actually their conversation, like one of my favorite conversations, because it's just like, Kiki being like, okay, I'm scared of you, but like also, you're cool. And I enjoyed writing that.
Also, because I think that the idea of being too much is a particular kind of slur that's been thrown at Black women a lot. And so to rebel against that is quite subversive, right? To be like, to be a whole lot of women, or to be a woman who is a lot, is a particular transgressive act. And I love that you wrote to me in the way that you did. Yeah, I think when people were fangirling over Malakai, I was fangirling over Simeon Idol. I was like, yes.
That. She's very much a crush-worthy character, if I do say so myself.
Thanks.
Yes, she definitely is. I wanted to speak about the place of time and forgiveness. So we know that Kiki has trauma in relation to friendship, and obviously create a moment where time has passed and these people to interact. I think what you were really trying to do there was to talk about the place of time. Like the time, as much as we want to say is a healer, it also allows us to step outside of our emotions, because the conversation that they have there is about, actually, we both misunderstood each other, right?
Yeah.
We definitely have not been talking to each other all this time for no reason, right?
Yeah.
Happened, but it didn't happen in the way that we both experienced it, right? I wanted to speak about that, why it was important for you to do that reconciliatory time and forgiveness setting, because it was beautiful, but also like quite pulling at heartstrings, because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm crying, so I gotta cry too.
Yeah, we both cried. Yeah, like I think that, okay, the biggest heartbreak I've ever had in my life was like high school best friend not being friends with her anymore. Like that hurt me, right? So I feel like I as a writer, I was like almost going through something myself, and I was, I would like to reconcile my, and we have since, but my high school best friend, and even if we're never going to be I don't even think we could be best friends in the same way again, just because when you're in high school, everything is, it's just so intense, right? And we've grown and evolved. But I wanted to show what it could be like when, yes, you're not going to be exactly how you were then, but that doesn't mean you can't have some form of friendship or connection, and also pay respect to that connection. I can think sometimes where we're no longer in someone's life, we have this feeling almost to survive, like to diminish what that was, diminish how special that relationship was. And I wanted to pay homage to that. Was such a special relationship to Kiki. And it's important for her to have, we can't always have closure. So that was, I would say that's one of the most fantastical parts of the book. That bit I will admit is a little bit of a fantasy. But I really wanted to show that we can have grace sometimes for each other, and we can do things that are genuinely hurtful to each other. Genuinely. And I think there should be space to understand that you're not necessarily the same person that you were then, or what you know now you didn't know then, and have a conversation about that. Yeah, and I wanted to also just talk about, because I always see this thing online, and it seems to be like a reoccurring thing. Like if you talk about a girl, ask a girl about what was her biggest heartbreak or her high school best friend, and she'll get emotional. It's honestly one of the most fundamental, for me, it was one of my most fundamental relationships in my life then, and also very intense. And I just wanted to pay respect to that. And I feel like also Kiki learns so much about herself through that. And I feel like almost when she has that moment of vulnerability, opens her up for like vulnerability with Malakai. So I wanted to show that not everything is about romance. Romance doesn't, it's not necessarily like falling in love that reveals so much about us, even though it does. Sometimes it's just about the friendships that we've lost. Yeah, but like reconciliation was important for me because I feel like sometimes some things you can't forgive, but I think sometimes we can discuss things and admit our fallibility as human beings.
One of the most romantic relationships to me is Dr. Miller, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot about Black people in academia, particularly in previously white institutions, but also what it means to be a Black woman in spaces that are particularly hostile like that, and the ways in which we find community, in the ways in which we find ourselves, we find others, but also how Black women show each other so much love in those spaces, right? And I think that the relationship with Dr. Miller for me is really interesting because it's not a formal mentor-mentee relationship, but it's an I see you in ways that other people in the space may not be able to see you. And I think that the act of being seen is such a beautiful act of love, right? It's actually one of the most important acts of love is to be seen. And even in the emails that Dr. Miller writes to her when things are happening with Zach, and there's a particular kind of love and not necessarily friendship, but kinship. And I
Yeah.
wanted to talk a little bit about the relationship with Dr. Miller and why you felt that it was important to write the relationship between an older woman and a younger woman in the way that you do.
Oh, there's so many layers. First of all, no one makes me act right than an older woman that I respect, especially an older Black woman that I respect. Nobody, I'm quite a confident person, but I blush when I'm around an older woman that I respect and I admire. And I really wanted to pay homage to that relationship. And also the fact that so many Black women have looked out for me when I was young and in media and trying to find myself, but namely an actual professor in my life when I was in my master's, and her surname was is Miller. And I studied American politics and history, but my kind of specialty was African American history and politics. And sometimes I went to UCL, which is a predominantly white school. And sometimes in seminars, and if we were discussing something that was particularly sensitive for Black women, she will look at me and be like, "Are you checking on me?" And then afterwards, she'll be like, "If you want to step out, you can step out." And I don't know, we just used to bond over things. I bumped into her in a Jill Scott concert. We just and then I felt so protected when I was around her, and she's actually the one who encouraged me to write about Lemonade and Black women. So my thesis was, yes, it was about Beyonce, but it was more about Black women throughout history and how they redefined their identities through musical performance. And I talked about Bessie Smith and Billie Holiday and Missy Elliott and Beyonce. And I feel like I would not have been able to write that essay without her. And she was my supervisor, and she encouraged me. She's like, these things are worthy of academic discussion. And she just really emboldened me in a way that I hadn't been before in a scholastic kind of academic environment. And I really wanted to write about that relationship of protection and the guidance of older Black women or older Black person can do in your life. And I just wanted to provide, because also Kiki's away from home. And yes, I could have calls to her mum, but I was like, I want her to have this maternal influence on campus, away from home, this pocket of safety. And even though Mr. Dr. Miller does not cross any boundaries, I had fun writing how she presented herself as, I'm there for you, without crossing any boundaries, or overtly showing favoritism, even though she was clearly a favorite.
Before we go, I wanted to talk about, I have one gripe.
Okay.
One. Only one.
Give it to me.
Kofi and Amina.
They made me take it out.
I
The
want
book
more.
was, the book was too long. The book was too long. So they made me.
I want more. There was a
Amina is problematic. Amina is problematic in that
Everyone's
respect.
there was a
problematic.
certainty there.
Everyone's
I
problematic.
felt needed exploration. I just wanted to be like, give me more. Like
So
there's a ping pong something that's happening
well, the
between
thing is, it was Malakai and Kiki's story, and for me to give Amina and Kofi some time, it would have taken too much time. It would have taken too much air away from Kiki and Malakai's story. But also, I'm glad that people want more of Kofi and Amina because it means that their relationship works. But I'd love for you to know why Amina is problematic because I know why she's problematic. But like, why do you think she's problematic?
I mean,
I think there's like a particular way in which sometimes we can take the people that we love for granted, right? And mistake the certainty of their presence for certainty of them knowing that we appreciate them, that we care about them, right? And there's a way in which she navigates that space with Kofi that's particularly interesting for me that I don't know she'd do with anybody else, right? So she speaks to Kiki and she's like, yeah, I know he and I are going to get married, but I just don't want him to feel a particular kind of way about me. I'm like, if this conversation was reversed and Kofi was having this conversation with Malakai, we would have words for Kofi, right?
more than words, right? More than words.
It's also, I think that there are relationships that we often feel so secure in, and whether it's friendship, whether it's romantic relationships, marriage, whatever, that we sometimes take for granted the privilege of having certain people in our lives. And I think also now it's funny because my husband and I was talking about that the other day. He and I have now been married for 5 years and time just flies, but there's almost like a comfort you can take in knowing that a particular person is always there, that sometimes translates into you not necessarily always having an appreciation for what it means to have the certainty of that person's presence. And I feel like Amina did some of that with Kofi, right? Gets to just be a little bit too easy about the fact that she has Kofi. And that translates sometimes into how she treats him, how she's saying mate to Kofi, and she knows she feels a very particular kind of way about him.
I agree. And I agree that if it was a man, we would be angry. And that's exactly why I wanted to write that, because I was like, I feel like women be like that sometimes too. And why can't we be like that? Why can't we see that? And I also wanted to show the messiness because I also wanted the opportunity for Kiki to like be like, girl, you're moving mad. I hope you realize that. And sometimes we need to do that for our friends too. I feel like we are so fallible. And I feel like these days, I feel like there's almost a dichotomy, like in romantic discussions where women are like angels and men are the devils. Men are so problematic. We know that. That is not even, we know. But also, girls can be problematic too. And I feel like it's almost empowering to admit that we are not angels and to delve into that. But I'm so excited for you to go into to read Sun Under Skin. I hope you read it because I really go into those dynamics. It gets even messier, and we do see a lot of more Kofi and Amina for you. So their relationship, yes, we're going to see a lot more of them and their dynamic and their issues and everything. But yeah, I really wanted to write. Yes, it's a romance book. Yes, it's a happy ending, but also it's not always a fairy tale. We're going to make mistakes, and we're going to be. It can be a little bit arrogant to take Kofi for granted because he's a sweet guy, and then I think she takes him for granted, like he's always going to be there. And I like that in the end. Kofi gives it back to her a little bit, like, listen.
And she don't like it.
Listen, I could have another girl if I wanted to. It's just that I want you.
Thank you so much for what has been a really wonderful conversation about Honey and Spice. As you can tell, excitement. We've really enjoyed it, and we will continue this conversation when we see each other soon. But obviously, we'll definitely be back because if Kofi and Amina are in the book and we still have Kiki and Malakai, we're going to be back. We're going to be back.
But except now it sounds like the happy ending is not the happy ending, right? And I have a thing about happy endings, Bolu. I have a thing about endings, particularly happy endings. And I before we close off, I wanted to speak about why you wrote happy endings. I feel like we're experiencing a dearth of happy endings, and I just need to address this. Nobody wants to write a happy ending anymore because people don't feel like people don't feel like they're realistic, right? So the idea that things can end well without the angst and the mess and things can come together has almost become an unpopular idea, and people feel like it's unrealistic, right? So mess makes sense, but happiness does not. And you chose to write what is like a happy ending for Malakai and Kiki. And I actually wanted to speak about that a little bit because in the end, things come together, right? Things come together. And I'm like, yeah, I see it. I see it. Things come together, but they also come into themselves. And there's individual victories, but the relationship is not the center point of their victories. The relationship is a happy part of the book, but for
Yeah.
both of them, they are individual victories. And there's just something to be said about maintaining your personhood, even in the midst of romance and happiness.
Oh, well, thank you so much for saying that. That was really important to me, that I wanted Kiki to have a triumph that wasn't just getting to kiss the boy at the end of the book. As great as that kiss was, I wanted her to have this. She ends the book with a great girl gang. She stands up to a bully and is confident within herself. And now her confidence is more real, really. I think before, a lot of it was, like you said before, protection of self. And now I feel like she is confident within her vulnerability. And then Kiki and Malakai is kind of like the cherry on top. And even though Malakai's issues with his father are not completely resolved, that's almost not the point. The point is he knows how to manage. He's almost working. He's admitted that he has those feelings, and he's working through it, and he's not letting those feelings and complex issues that he has with his dad inhibit him from having a healthy relationship. As for a happy ending with Malakai and Kiki, I can't spoil because I'm writing on the sequel. But I will say I don't not write happy endings, but also happy endings they can be a little bit complex to get to when you grow up. We have to remember that Malakai and Kiki met when they're like 19, 20. They're young. Well, life has to happen. So I'm actually really enjoying writing the grown and sexy evolution of the Black Pearl gang.
I'm really excited for it. But once again, Bolu, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Had so much fun. Thank you so much.
Okay, Cheeky Natives, I'll definitely see you very soon. But we just wanted to say, don't forget to get Love in Color and Honey and Spice.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yay. Thank you so much, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you, Bolu. And can't wait for the sequel. Dum, 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 dum.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Cheeky Natives. Don't forget to subscribe, review, and rate the podcast on all your streaming platforms.